Dobrze, nie przedstawiam, tak to bym się już zestresował, tak okropnie. 15 minut tak stoisz.
Jest
Dobra.
akademicki jeszcze, nie?
No jeszcze.
Jesteśmy live. Na razie... O, dobra. Muszę tylko zmienić link, ale już możemy zaczynać. Jesteśmy online.
Tak? Okej. Cześć wszystkim. Udało się nam... O, przepraszam. Udało nam się zacząć lekko spóźnieni. 15 minut, czy studencko jest ok. Ale mieliśmy robione testy na produkcji. Niestety nie działa nam mikrofon, więc na streamie nie byłoby nas w ogóle słychać. Więc witam Was na pierwszym meetupie magentowym w tym roku. W końcu się udało ogarnąć go. Mamy teraz plany, żeby robić go częściej cyklicznie, tak jak było w okresach przedpandemicznych. Tylko nie co miesiąc, lecz co 2 miesiące. Przez to, że trochę za trudno jest nam załatwić prelegentów. Teraz udało nam się załatwić 2, Anię i Bartka, za co dziękujemy, że się zgłosili. I można im pogratulować brawami. Tak. Jak są jacyś ludzie, którzy są chętni też na zgłoszenie się i zrobienie jakiejś prezentacji, to bardzo zapraszamy. Można się kontaktować albo do Bartka, albo do mnie, albo do Kuby. Nie ma najmniejszego problemu z tym. I tak, bardzo chcielibyśmy podziękować sponsorom, bo bez nich by nam się nie udało tego ogarnąć. Więc tak, na pewno trzeba podziękować TPay, który udostępnił nam miejscówkę z najlepszym widokiem na Poznań, chociaż już nie jest aż tak dobrze, bo 2 miesiące temu było lepiej, a za 2 miesiące kolejne będzie jeszcze lepiej, więc możecie przyjść i sprawdzić. Musimy podziękować też Centurii, która załatwiła nam piwo i pizzę. Dosyć ważną część naszych spotkań meetupowych. Także dziękujemy Snowdogowi za organizację. Myślę, że powoli możemy przechodzić do pierwszej prezentacji, ponieważ mamy te 15 minut opóźnienia, więc zapraszam Bartosza. Pierwsza prezentacja będzie w języku angielskim. Jeżeli ktoś będzie chciał zadawać pytanie w języku polskim, to też nie ma problemu. Bartek znał też język polski, więc myślę, że da radę. Okej, to oddaję głos i jeszcze raz brawa dla Bartka.
Thank you very much. Like Adrian said, the first presentation will be in English since we have a stream, and from what I've seen, there are some people registered online who may not speak Polish, so this is why. So, I'm Bartosz, I'm a community member for over a decade, and today I'm gonna talk about the performance of product attributes. So, let's start. And let's start with a disclaimer. So, basically, what I'm going to show you today, that's not based on Adobe official recommendations. That's based on my personal recommendations. This is something that I'm using in all the projects, basically, in which I'm participating. And yeah, so my employer is taking no responsibility, and that's it, basically. Still, that's going to be a useful piece of knowledge. So let's start with a problem statement. So basically, there is, and I'm sure that you will all agree, there is no single Adobe Commerce / Magento project in which the owner would be happy with only the out-of-the-box attributes. So as developers or architects or people who participate in those projects, we always have to add additional attributes, and we have basically 2 options to add those attributes. We have custom attributes, so-called custom attributes, and we have extension attributes. The problem is, though, the more we add, the worse the performance gets, always, with every single attribute that we add. That's simple. The more we have to pull from the database, the bigger the query is, the worse the performance. So this is basically less visible for regular custom attributes, but it's becoming more visible with extension attributes, because extension attributes are usually way more complex. So, how do they work? Custom attributes, we can add them via admin panel, we can add them in data patches. They usually represent a single thing about the product, just a single value. And they are usually loaded along with the rest of the product data. Whereas extension attributes, while they can also be, they can also represent simple values, in a lot of cases they represent some more complex models along with some logic. And a good example of that is the stock item, which is added to the product as an extension attribute. As we know, the stock is not only a single value, there is a lot to it, like if the product is in stock, out of stock, what's the quantity, can we back order that, etc. So there is a lot to that. And for this kind of data, we need extension attributes. And extension attributes, they are not loaded automatically with the rest of the product data in a lot of cases. So we need some additional logic to include them. Let's get to the next slide. So, some examples. So for custom attributes, we can have an energy efficiency as an example. So everyone living in Europe is pretty familiar with what we have on the slide here on the right side. Energy efficiency is an attribute pretty much for everything that's electronic. When we buy something that's electronic, we always see this kind of data attached to the product. And also vendors are legally forced to show you this data. Whenever you buy something, you have to know what the energy efficiency is. Another example of a custom attribute that can be some legacy ID. So if we, for example, migrate from some other product to Adobe Commerce, sometimes we want to keep some legacy IDs. That's a simple value. We can use a custom attribute for that. Whereas extension attributes, I already have given one example of that, the stock item. Another example can be a vendor. So usually when we have a vendor attached to a product, there is also some more data about the vendor. Not only the name of the vendor, but also some additional data, which we may or may not want to show to end users. Sometimes this kind of data will be shown only to admins. But still, this data exists, so we cannot really use custom attributes for that, because we would have to create a lot of custom attributes for every single piece of data, one attribute. So usually we go for extension attributes. Now let's talk about custom attributes, how they are loaded. So they are loaded automatically with the rest of the product data when products are loaded via repository in any way, because there is get list. They are always loaded this way, using the repository, or using a resource model. So yeah, so with that, the data will be automatically added. This data is not automatically added when we pull the product data using a collection. So as you can see, with different approaches, we get different results. And also it's worth to mention that REST product endpoint will load all the attributes, all the custom attributes, even if you selected only a subset of them to be shown in the response. And here we have an example. So this is a long URL, but as you can see, the last part in the second one is the difference. That's the only difference between those two URLs. In the second case, we are only requesting 2 pieces of data. Those are not even custom attributes. They are regular attributes out of the box. But still, with both URLs, the execution time will be the same because this data gets filtered only after the product is already loaded. So there is that. Now let's talk about extension attributes, how they are loaded. So basically, we have two ways of defining an extension attribute. One with join and the other one with no join. I hope the font is visible on the slide because it's rather small. But yeah, in the first case, we have this join here. In the second case, we only define the code and the type of the attribute. So with the first one, the join is added only when getList method is used from a repository. The second one requires some custom logic. So you have to define this attribute as the first step, but it will never get loaded unless you add some custom logic for it. And this is an example of some custom logic. So there are basically, those are called handlers. There is a read handler and there is a save handler. Those are the most important ones. And when you create some custom logic, you usually only have to create those two. There is also an update handler, but it doesn't really matter. So with those handlers, the attribute will get loaded, but it will get loaded only after all the product data is loaded. So still, there is a performance issue. That's not a single SQL query. That's a separate one. And also, it's not loaded at all if you are using a collection. So as you can see, there are differences. For different use cases, different attributes behave differently. So let's go to a different slide. So what you see on this one is plugins. So usually when you get some commerce project that is already customized, you will see a lot of those created. Before load, after get list. There is a trillion different ways of adding this kind of data to attach the attribute, the extension attribute, to the rest of the product data. But beware, if you are going for anything that has after in its name, then obviously the product data will be loaded again before your attribute gets loaded. So still, we end up with more than one query to the database, which is not an optimal solution. So let's start with the right choice. What I want to tell you on this slide is that there is no single bullet. Based on your specific use case, you can go either for a custom attribute or for an extension attribute. There are different ways of loading extension attributes, as you have seen already on the previous slide in this deck. So there are some things to consider. If the attribute is complex, then obviously you can go only for the extension attribute. You cannot go for a custom attribute. Next question, is it going to be used in every use case, or at least in majority of cases that require a product to get loaded? The next question, will the attribute be manipulated, or is it only for display purposes? So all those questions have to be answered because before you can decide which way to go. So what if an attribute is needed only conditionally or not always? So let's take that vendor as an example that I have attached to one of the previous slides. So we have a vendor attribute, but for some reason, we don't really want to show that on the storefront. The vendor attribute is only for some backend purposes. So the admin knows from which vendor a product comes. So let's assume that we have an extension attribute for this. We don't want this extension attribute to always get loaded with some after load, before load, any custom logic that may have been created for this already. We don't want that because it's only conditional. And usually we are more concerned about the storefront performance than the backend performance. So if something is not used on storefront, then we really need to consider how not to load this. And here is how. So this is what I'm using in all my projects, basically, all the projects that I'm part of. So instead of creating an extension attribute and some logic to unconditionally load it every time the product data gets loaded, we can have some conditional logic for that. And now the presentation will, it is already a lot of more backend oriented, way backend oriented. And right now it will really get technical. So as you know, when you are adding an extension attribute with some plugin, you attach that plugin usually to the product. Like, for example, for the get extension attributes method. So whenever that method is called, there is a plugin that loads a specific extension attribute and attaches it to the whole array of extension attributes. That's an unconditional logic. This is something that we don't want. So instead of that, we can choose a different direction. So what we can do is we can create an extension attribute for the product with the product ID. So it may seem redundant because basically with this logic shown here, we are making the extension object aware of its parent product object with this ID. And while it may seem redundant, and someone might argue that this is not a good pattern to, couple those objects together even more than they are coupled already, this is very helpful because with this approach, we can conditionally load other extension attributes. So let's get to step 2. So I mentioned the plugin for get extension attributes that in a lot of cases is used for loading specific extension attributes or all the extension attributes for a product or any other entity. I'm using a product as an example here, but basically the same logic works for every kind of extensible object. So instead of loading every extension attribute this way, we can load only the product ID. So whenever get extension attributes is called on a product, we are attaching the product ID to the array of extension attributes. So that's a pretty simple logic. As you can see, the actual after get extension attributes method has only 2 lines in this case. In other cases, it may be a bit more difficult. It depends on how we want to couple those objects together. Like in the case of products, we only need the ID. In some other cases, we may go for some different data. We may go for SKU, or for some other objects, we may want to include other kinds of data along, for example, with a store ID if we are going to load other attributes with a store scope. So it depends. But for this example, let's go with a product with only a product ID. So as you can see, not a lot of logic so far in step 2. In step 3, we are creating a plugin for the product extension interface, which is different to how we would proceed normally with a plugin for the product interface. And here, we are plugging into the product extension interface because we can do that because at this point, the product extension interface or the extension object attached to a product is already aware of its parent product object. It already has the ID. So we have a simple plugin for that. And in that plugin, we can have some additional logic for a specific extension attribute. So in here, in this example, we have after get my extension attribute. So my extension attribute, that's the name of the attribute. So yeah, so if it's already there in the extension, we return it. Because this logic got executed already, we have the data, we can return it simply. Then another condition, get product ID. If it's not there, it's not really visible that much, but there is an exclamation mark here, so that's a negation. If the product ID is not there, it means that we created this extension object without the parent product object, therefore we cannot really load any product-related data in it. So that's it. And then we have an actual logic for attaching this particular extension attribute to the project, to the product. So we are loading it. If it's not there, if there is no data, we can return null. If there is some data, we can set the data on the product, because as we have seen in step 1, we already created this myExtension attribute as the attribute of a product. So let's go back to step 3. In here, in the second last line, we are actually setting it. We already loaded it, we are setting it, and we are returning it. Now let's go to pros and cons of this. So basically, the biggest pro is that it will not load unless it's needed. Because how we hooked into the logic is that this data gets loaded, this myExtension attribute gets loaded only when we actually requested it from the extension object. Not unconditionally, as we would usually do, but conditionally only when it's requested. So if we have some use cases when we don't need this attribute, we are not requesting it, then it will not get loaded at all. Therefore, we have a performance boost because we have one less piece of data to load. And yeah, since there is no overhead before calling product get my extension attributes, get my attribute, it's still possible to create more fine-tuned optimizations. So, for example, if we load multiple products, we don't really want to load this piece of data one by one. We can have some more fine-tuned logic to load this myExtension attribute for all the products that we requested. So with this approach, we can write such logic. So basically, this approach is extensible. We can fine-tune it. And yeah, and let's go to cons. So as the downside of this approach, whenever we request this attribute in this way, it's still additional query to the database. It's not loaded with the rest of the product data, it's still additional query. So if we have some piece of data that we know we will always need, or we will usually need, then this approach will not work. It would actually decrease the performance instead of improving the performance. So basically, we need to be aware of what we are doing and what the business wants from us before we start implementing this. Or better yet, so what I'm presenting here on this slide is a question I'm usually asking whenever someone creates an attribute, an extension attribute. Because usually in a lot of projects, you would see a lot of extension attributes. So whenever people see that something they want to load is product related, they are creating an extension attribute for it. So what we will end up in big projects is sometimes 5, 10, or even 20 extension attributes. The question is, do we really need this data to be attached to a product via extension attribute? Because, for example, if we need some data, like this vendor, for example, that I used already as an example, if we need this only in some cases, like in the admin panel, but not in the storefront at all, why do we have to attach this to a product at all? Can we not create some custom logic and some controller or something else that will just load the data, load the model corresponding to the data separately, and then work with the data this way? We don't really have to create extension attributes for everything that's product related, right? Or related to any other entities, because that's not only for products. The product is usually the most bloated object, but the same principle applies to customers or any other custom logic you may have in the project. So before you create an extension attribute, think if you really need this to be attached to a product. If you do, sure, go for an extension attribute. And I recommend using this lazy loading technique that I've shown on previous slides, if this applies to your use case, of course. But if you don't really need this to be attached to a product, then don't attach that to a product. And that would be it. Any questions for me? Can be in Polish. Go ahead.
Ja to mogę tak podsumować, czy dobrze zrozumiałam. W momencie, kiedy instalujemy ten atrybut, extension atrybut, on dopiero faktycznie się włoży do tego produktu, jeśli zrobimy request na ten produkt. W sensie użyjemy go, nie wiem, do wyświetlania, czy go zmodyfikujemy i wtedy dopiero ten atrybut się nam tam załączy, tak? To ten lazy load, tak zrozumiałam, czy...
Tak. Wracając do tego slajdu, tutaj mamy ten My Extension Attribute zdefiniowany jako atrybut. No i normalnie byśmy dodali logikę, która gdzieś tam after load czy coś po prostu wrzuci wszystkie atrybuty tego typu do produktu.
No i w bazie danych będziemy mieć z pustymi wartościami ten atrybut.
No, z pustymi czy nie, generalnie chodzi o to, że nie zawsze potrzebujemy je wszystkie. Na przykład jeżeli mamy 20 extension attributes, a na przykład w naszym requestie potrzebujemy tylko 2, bo na przykład na stronie produktu potrzebujemy ich więcej, wszystkie 20, ale na przykład na stronie kategorii już byśmy chcieli pokazać mniej, żeby tam nie zaśmiecać po prostu customerom, nie? No to wtedy nie chcemy ich wszystkich ładować, tylko chcielibyśmy załadować rzeczywiście tylko te, które są nam potrzebne. I właśnie dzięki temu rozwiązaniu, że doczepiamy sobie, w sumie jeszcze wrócę tutaj, doczepiamy sobie ten product ID do tego obiektu z extension attributami, on wtedy wie, do którego produktu jest przypisany i dzięki temu tutaj, w tym kroku, nie tutaj, w kroku trzecim mamy tą funkcję after get my extension attribute. Czyli jeżeli, no na przykład dajmy sobie, że pracujemy na headful, gdzieś tam mamy lumę albo jakieś inne pochodne, no i w templatce chcielibyśmy sobie pokazać dane z takiego extension attributa, no to mamy product, get extension attributes, get my custom attribute. I dopiero odpalona, dopiero wtedy rzeczywiście ten atrybut się z bazy załaduje. No czyli minusem rzeczywiście jest to, że no to jest osobne zapytanie do bazy, natomiast plusem jest to, że to jest gdzieś tam zapytanie o jeden atrybut, może 2, 3, a nie o tam 20, 30 czy ile ich tam mamy, nie? I tu jest właśnie ten performance gain, że one się załadują dopiero wtedy, kiedy rzeczywiście chcemy wyświetlić ich wartość. Any other questions? Jakieś inne pytania?
Czy możesz powiedzieć, jak to debugujesz, czy używasz jakiegoś APM-a, żeby widzieć, gdzie tam jest czerwono, gdzie zielono i poprawić? XML wiadomo, że można sobie przejrzeć, klasy też, ale jak zaczynasz projekt, to powinno odpalać sobie jakieś narzędzia, żeby wiedzieć, gdzie jesteś, nie?
Tak, i to jest dobry temat na kolejną prezentację, którą mam nadzieję zrobić w tym roku. Tak, jeżeli chodzi o performance, to debuguję sobie to SPX-em i dla niezorientowanych, a tych, którzy korzystają z Wardena jako stacka lokalnego, SPX jest już wbudowany czyli można sobie z niego korzystać bez jakichś dodatkowych problemów z modyfikacją lokalnego stacka, no bo też nie każdy Docker stacka potrafi sobie gdzieś tam lokalnie pomodyfikować. Tak, więc generalnie patrzę sobie w tego SPX-a, widzę, że ładowanie tych wszystkich extension attributes trwa 1 000 000 lat i właśnie stąd cała ta prezentacja, stąd cały ten pomysł, żeby lazy loadować je. Bo jeżeli mamy atrybuty, które są gdzieś tam, no powiedzmy, malutkie, no to okej, no jak załadujemy ich powiedzmy 5 małych, no to może nic wielkiego się nie stanie, nie? Natomiast jeżeli mamy jakieś duże extension attributes, które ładują wiele danych, jeszcze nie daj Boże gdzieś tam uderzają w jakiegoś API zewnętrznego, które może Ci zwrócić dane w 5 milisekund, a może w 5 sekund, no to tym bardziej nie chcemy takiego atrybutu ładować unconditionally. Jesus, how to say it in Polish? Z mojej strony wszystko. Z waszej strony? Dzięki.
Dzięki Bartek. Dobra, Krzychu, jak coś, to cię zapiszę na kolejną prezentację. Jak będziesz testował sobie to, jak sprawdzać, tak do ciebie mówię, Krzychu.
Że ja mam to zaprezentować?
Tak, jak coś, to już cię zapiszę na za 2 miesiące.
Naprawdę mówisz, że chcę, ale...
Nie, Bartek.
Chętnie oddam. Chętnie ci to oddam.
Tak, dobra, to potrzebujemy jeszcze jakieś, nie wiem, z 2 minutki. Anioł, ile potrzebujesz czasu na podłączenie się? 3 minutki, ok? Dobra, to za 3 minutki wracamy.
Znaczy jest Wi-Fi dla gości, więc nie musisz udostępniać. Tutaj jest i hasło zaufane, tam jakoś mogę Ci pomóc trzymać, ale ja
Zapowiem jeszcze Anię. Jest drugi prelegent na dzisiejszym spotkaniu. Ania ma 10 lat ponad doświadczenia w Magento, więc już stara gwardia magentowa. Dzisiaj opowie nam o tym, jak przygotowywać klienta oraz zespół na upgrade Magento. Więc brawa dla Ani.
So I will actually talk in English, I guess. So I'm Anna Krzyżańska, I'm solution architect working with Magento, as he already said, for about 10 years or even more, I guess. I started with Magento 1, now I'm having like all my journeys with Magento 2, of course. So let's start. We are talking about Magento upgrade. I will talk about that from the solution architect perspective. So it will be a little bit different probably than from developer or project manager perspective. You will see. So why is upgrade important? We will not talk about that. We all know it's important, and I will not make that discussion now. So let's not waste time for that. But we know those are like 3 keys, like general keys that basically say that. And this is why we do it. So let's go to the next slide. So what we should start with when we talk about Magento upgrade, from my perspective, it's about like how confident you think about Magento upgrade when you need to do it. So you need to ask yourself some questions, and this is the presentation basically. Do I know the project well? Am I up to date with all the crucial project informations? And your job right now is in your head, probably answer those questions, no matter what is your position in the team. And even if you think like, yeah, I do, and you're pretty confident with that answer, I guess you're not actually, because there's plenty other questions you need to ask yourself to be actually confident and say that with confidence, like, yes, I know the project, I know I'm up to date with all the crucial informations, and I can prepare Magento upgrade for my clients, like with highest quality I can do. So let's go with another questions. First, there will be some little bit technical questions, not so much, but that will actually that will be like some kind of checklist for you, those questions, if you actually have the knowledge. So let's go with some custom question like, what are the most important free modules that you installed on the project? Do you know them? Can you actually write them down? And if you do, okay. If not, then we'll talk about it soon. There's also second question, do you know, and you can write down actually most important free customizations you did in the project. And the third one, what payments and shipping modules are enabled? And I'm not talking about what they are, what kind of solutions were provided for that matter, because Magento already have a lot of shipping and payment modules inside out of the box. So in most cases, they're enabled or disabled. Maybe you have some additional ones, but it's also very important to know if they are actually enabled. And if you are able to say right now that you know which ones are enabled, which ones your clients are using, then good, nice. So why we are asking the first question is because many third-party modules cannot be compatible when the Magento upgrade actually is going live. So we need to actually ask ourselves, do we know if for all those modules we already have compatible versions for the upgraded Magento version? We also need to check if they're continued. So sometimes it happens, you have some modules and those modules actually will no longer have any updates. So when the Magento upgrade is coming, you can actually, you know, find yourself in a position where you have a little bit problem because you don't have an update for the module for the upgraded version you need to do. And of course, some of the modules that will be updated with Magento upgrade can actually overwrite some code, and that also can create some kind of problems. So what you can do, list of all active extensions, also those that are not active, you can do it also. Why? Probably a lot of people have in a project a lot of modules, and they have all the information in Jira, in some tickets, in so many places. So it will be nice to have those information in one place, wrote down, and also it will be a nice help for a QA or project manager, especially if the project manager is not so technical, but he needs to get that knowledge to create such a list. About the discontinued modules, you can also ask your providers if they will continue or not. If you see that there's no updated version for the Magento upgrade version you're doing right now, you can also ask them. They will tell you it will take you 3 to 5 minutes probably to get that information, and it will help you avoid situation like you made an upgrade of Magento and something is not working with the module. And test crucial extensions, that's also a helpful thing for QAs, as I said, because the list of modules and extensions will actually give him like a heads up, like which ones of those modules are critical, which ones he should or she should be focused on when testing the extensions on, for example, at first local environment. So The second question about the custom solutions, why we should ask ourselves about that. Custom code can break with the upgrade, so we need to be prepared. Sometimes we make a customization that was done 2 years ago. We don't remember what that code is doing, and we don't know if the Magento upgrade will impact that code, so we need to check it. We need to have a list of those customizations. And not only free, but all of them probably would be nice to have it also in the one place. I actually recommend making just, spreadsheet with all those informations in one place for every single member of the team. Custom functionalities often interact with third-party extensions or APIs, so that's also nice to check. Sometimes we are actually connecting customizations with the API, and that API is actually changing because the moment of Magento upgrade. So all those vessels are actually connected, and we need to check that. The performance issue can arise also, so that's another thing we should check. So what we can do, of course, identify and document key customizations, assess if the custom solution needs refactoring in that case, and run code audits. That's like nice to do thing. And I know sometimes a client will not agree to do that, but if there's a time for that, please do it always. I had like a lot of situations where actually those audits were able to catch some potential problems with the next upgrade, and because of that we were able to communicate that to the client very early, and because of that he was actually he gained like more trust with our team and was able to agree that these things needs to be fixed before upgrade. So it's good to do it. Next thing, payments and shipping methods. We know it's crucial for e-commerce. Without that, e-commerce is not working. So we basically need to focus on that and ask ourselves if we actually know what is enabled, what is configured. We need to remember that with upgrade of Magento, the additional configuration of some payments and shipping methods can be done, and we need to be aware of that. And shipping modules are tied with the carry APIs. Sometimes something can change, and it's a good time before making an upgrade of Magento to check it. So check for compatibility updates. That's the first thing. Configure API endpoints and credentials. That's also like a crucial thing, I guess. We need to know that we have all the credentials we need, and run test transactions. And by run test transaction is staging environment, also in the local environment. I actually advise you to do it before making an upgrade on any kind of environment, because sometimes sandbox environments are not working just because they have a timeout, they don't work in some kind of time in the day. During the day, I had that situations a lot of times with different providers of payments. So it's good to first make the testing of transactions on sandbox mode before doing anything with Magento upgrade, just to make sure how those sandbox environments are working, if they are working always or not. So let's be prepared. So the game changer, of course, I will always push it in every single presentation I have, I guess. The documentation. The documentation matters. It builds client trust. If you will share the documentation with your client, that's my experience, he will see that we actually did something, because he doesn't see the code that we did. He doesn't see how many hours we work on the code and how many hours it will take for make an upgrade. Sometimes it takes a lot of hours, and you need to be able to somehow, represent the team and say why it's taking so long. But by having the documentation, write down with all the lists, all the modules, all the extensions, all the crucial custom code you did, and functionalities, it will build the trust of the client. And of course, it prevents surprises. We don't like surprises. Any client, I don't think anyone likes surprises like that. So that will be always a game changer. And I know that this is basically today's problem of very many companies right now, that they avoid making a documentation that's accurately updated. And if you have actually a problem with update of your documentation, then use actually Magento Upgrade to use the time and make an update of that documentation if you already have it. That's the best case. Sometimes even spending few internal hours will make a difference here. So that was the part about like more technical stuff. Let's ask ourselves about what we know about store performance and traffic considerations of the store. So, for example, what search engine is used in the project? Do you know? I actually sometimes forgot because there are so many search engines that can be used. Some are the out of the box, some are the first party search engines, and actually Magento Upgrade is connected to that. What is the current daily visit count? That is also important. Do you know it right now? I don't actually, but it would be nice to have that knowledge before you will start Magento Upgrade. And how many products are currently in the live production environment? That's also very crucial thing. And actually Bartek talked something about that on the last presentation, that the performance and the products are very connected when it comes to Magento Store. So what search engine is used to the project? Of course, Magento supports multiple search engines, and search affects site performance, customer experience, and conversions rates. So it's good to know what kind of search engine do you have, and how much time you will need to spend to make an indexer run after Magento Upgrade. So those questions are something you can ask your developers, and they should be able to let you know something about that. So what you can do as a summary, you can identify which search engine is currently in use, check if the Magento Upgrade impacts search configuration actually, and and check their index time. That's a good thing to do. Current daily visits, why? Because when you are planning Magento upgrades, you should always think about when it's the best time to do it. And as we know, the best time to do it for the store is when there are, a little bit of clients on the site, We should not do it in a peak. So, yeah. So if the traffic store is very high, you need to know what will be the downtime. If there's a downtime risk, actually, you need to know those things. So if you know the current visit count, daily visit count, then it will actually provide you all the other details, and you will ask those questions to your team. And that question actually generates a lot of other questions about planning the Magento upgrade. So, what you can do? Load tests, of course. You can get the information from Google Analytics. And do it. Probably should plan it in during low traffic hours. And temporary scaling of servers is also recommended, but not always. Of course, there are some. It depends on the configuration, environment, and everything. So, yeah. How many products are there? Of course, large products catalog can impact database performance. The reindex, of course, that will also have an impact on reindex time. And also sometimes, additional column is added to the product database, and it needs to be reindexed, and it can take a long time. So you need to plan it. Of course, content of the product is also crucial. We need to know and make sure that nothing will go wrong with that when we will go live with the upgraded Magento version. Team preparation, who is responsible? Those are another questions that we should ask ourselves just before making Magento upgrade. So who has the best knowledge about the project? It's not always the developer, actually. Sometimes it's QA. For me, I had some situations where QA was the one that had the best knowledge about the project, because, for example, developers were jumping on and off in the project, but the QA were never changed. So he can be your, knowledge base, let's say. But you're actually, as project manager, solution architect, your role is to be the one that has the best knowledge right now. Who is currently the primary tester? How many QA testers can I get for an upgrade? Do you know it? Ask yourself. Who is assigned to make the upgrade? I mean, one of the developers probably should be assigned. Do I have a team member who can help me with technical details? Help is always needed. You were not able to know 100% information about the project. Sometimes you need to ask something very technical, and you need someone to Google Translate you to 5 years old language. And who will make a list of modules that need an upgrade while upgrading Magento? That's also something that will actually probably help you with the question number 3, because that should be the same person from my perspective. Okay, so why it matters? I already told you the key people who understand the architecture, past issues and custom solutions are very crucial for Magento upgrade, because they will probably give you an information to avoid any surprises. And additional thing is that if you have that one person, you need to ask yourself, is this actually good? Because we should share the knowledge always. So if you have only one expert like that, you should do something maybe in the internal hours to provide some kind of meetings that will share that knowledge about the project to other different team members. And about the QAs, of course, they're the most important part in the Magento upgrades from my perspective. They need to test everything, so you always need to make sure that they are available in the time you want to make an upgrade, and there should be more than one. And I'm talking not about like manual tests, but also automation tests. You still need a support of the QA. And document critical project details. As I said, documentation is the game changer forever. The primary tester, knowing how many testers are available help determine test coverage and timelines. So that would be nice if you will be able to very nicely talk to your client that you have everything prepared and you have QAs on the stand and they are waiting to do it. And yeah, they also will probably give you some kind of information like about their perspective, what is crucial for them, what kind of functionalities will take more to test. So use that knowledge and try to gather it as much as you can. And QA resources are sometimes limited. Yes, consider automating testing, that's one thing. Or ask for user acceptance testing from your client if that's possible. I always ask about that because I think after all the client is also has like a different perspective and he can actually catch something you are not able to because you're looking on the project for 2 years and you're basically blind after 2 years. So it's good to have them on board. If they can actually assign someone that will, for example, test the storefront, that would be nice. Because in like 90% of situations, I wasn't able to catch something that our client was able to. And our QAs also, because they are also staring on the project for 2 years, for example. Assigning the project, assigning the developer to the, assigning Magento upgrade to the developer is crucial. We should have someone that will have the final decision when it comes how he would do something. As solution architect, I'm the one that will also have my own opinion and go to, for example, project manager and the client to decide. But there should be one final person that will say like something is good for the project or something is not good for the project. And the upgrade team should include both backend and frontend developers, of course. So don't do it without the frontend developer. And if you are able to find someone that actually already did an Magento upgrade, that is from my perspective, that's the best choice. And after that, someone that is very long in the project. So next one. Do I have team member who can actually help me with details? as I said, if only one person is responsible for the upgrade, troubleshooting becomes inefficient. Having a backup team member is also a good thing to think of when it comes to Magento upgrade. And always have a document who you can actually contact with when it comes to separate things like database infrastructure and custom modules. Sometimes, for example, the infrastructure is in a other company that is responsible for that. So it's good to have a documentation that will say basically who's responsible for what, and for what technical details I can go and ask, specific person that is in that document. So I will not waste time of some team member that doesn't have that knowledge. Who will make a list of Magento modules that need to be upgraded? Of course, when you make Magento upgrade, you will probably need to upgrade some kind of some modules and extensions. And yeah, I already talked about that overlooked modules and extensions that don't have are not anymore supported. That's something that really can, cost your clients a lot, actually. I had that situation in my 10 years experience where we actually didn't spot one extensions, and it actually break the whole store on the live side. It worked on staging, but it didn't work on the live side because of that module behavior, let's say. So yeah, do it. Assign a dedicated team member, check for available module updates, and ensure module updates are tested in staging first, of course, or any other environment that is not production. So this is like a sum up of that part of the presentation. Clarifying responsibilities in advance, a strong testing team is essential, and ensure upgrade tasks are assigned and documented. Planning upgrade. That's also something you need to always do. Before upgrade, we need to plan it. So you need to ask yourself, what are the risk areas of the project? You should know it. The risk areas are other important thing, or things that broke a lot, because we know that there are projects where some provider, for example, is not working every single week, and you need to do something about that. So those risk areas are pretty important. When was the last deployment or code change? If you're able to say that, that's good. Did we compare release notes to our project? That's also something you should plan when upgrade is done. Do we have a list of steps that clearly show the process? That's, I think, the most important part when we plan things. Make the list of steps or diagram or anything that will clearly show the process of how the Magento upgrade is done. Not for you, not for your team members, mostly for your client. What place in the source of is the source of truth for the Magento upgrade? That's also something we forgot about. I had situations where a lot of informations were in a lot of emails, Jira, Confluence, everything was like spread around, and to find the clear path where all the informations that was actually an issue. It actually cost a lot of time for the client. So it's nice to have one source of truth and decide where you will stack it. So let's go back to risk areas. What can be risk areas? Custom code extensions, integrations, performance and scalability, front-end and UI changes, checkout and transactions. And what we can do, of course, document high-risk areas, plan a rollback option. That's also a nice thing to do, because without rollback options, you basically can be in a very rough situation, and you don't want that discussion with your client that something is not working, but you actually cannot go back and fix those things and then try again later. And prioritize testing basis on these risk areas. When was the last deployment or code change? Why we should ask ourselves the thing is that because we need to know how many times you make an update, deployment or code change on the production, if it's once a week or two times a week or once a month. It actually matters because that will actually have an impact on the code freeze and about how you should behave when you know that the upgrade is coming and you actually have to do it because, for example, of the security reasons. So how active is the project? It matters. It will actually give you like the start when you are planning when to do it, how to do it, and when you want to actually stop developing the new features, because the rule is that you should not make an upgrade Magento with actually the same deployment with some new features. Why? Because debugging the code, when something will go wrong, you will not be able to identify what is the problem, if the problem is the Magento upgrade or maybe your actually features that you wrote. So always try to separate those things and do Magento upgrade plus maybe some fixes to that Magento upgrade. And that should be the package you will deploy on production. So that's about that. Did we compare the release notes to our project? Release notes on Magento for Magento are actually very, very long. I tried to read all of them once. I didn't manage actually. So actually I prepared myself a table. I took all those release notes, create a table with filters, actually point some areas for each change that was in the release notes, and that actually gave me some kind of an image of what's going on with that package and what will actually be done with that upgrade. Because when we are reading those, I actually have no idea what's going on. So compare those changes that will be done in Magento upgrade with the things you have, like the list you already have with Magento and modules and extensions with custom functionalities, and you will probably be able to see like, okay, this will impact that one, and this can impact that one. So you already have, you are already able to see the potential risk that comes with the Magento upgrade you need to do. So what should do, who should do this? Solution architect, the lead developer can do something like that. QA sometimes, and project manager, if it's like more technical project manager, he's also able to do it. This is like an example I did some time ago. Very easy thing to do. Just like tag actually every single change that was done with, I think that's 2.4.6, but I don't remember. But if, for example, your project is based on GraphQL because you do something with GraphQL or a lot of the things, then you will probably check for those changes and see if they will impact things you actually done with GraphQL. Probably not, but there's also always a chance. Do we have a list of steps that currently shows the process? That's the important part. I really like when the team knows what will be next. I really like to know what I need to do next. So those steps are nice to have when it comes to Magento upgrade. Some Magento upgrades will have some additional steps. Some are very easy to do. So that's a nice thing to do. Like not the general steps, not general process that will be invented in the company and used for every single project, but actually a specific list of steps that needs to be done for that specific project. And when you will show it to the team, they will probably tell you that there are some other steps that you need to add to that list. What can be done in that step-by-step list? Pre-upgrade analysis, code, and database backup. What needs to be done about that? What steps can be done when it comes to database backup, upgrade extensions, testing and validation, production deployments. So document each step in a shared space. The shared space would be nice to share it with your client. And sure, the process is described in simple terms. share the plan with the clients and stakeholders, and assign responsibilities on that list. That's also a nice thing to do when you know that some of the steps are actually responsibilities of developers or testers or project managers. This is example of the list. Like I did it like 2 minutes just to have something here. This is like the more described one, like more steps you can add, and probably that are not all of the steps you can actually do when it comes to Magento upgrade. There's a lot of them. It's good to have a diagram. Actually, I guess clients really like images instead of text. So if you can do it, show your client how it will work step by step. You can, I don't know, make a map whose responsibility is for each step, who's the contact person even. And because and with something like that, your client will actually maybe like have less. He will not need to spend a lot of time of trying to understand. He will just understand, and maybe even more willingly approve some additional step to that process, because he will already see that the process is, complicated, but you still want them to have the best experience when it comes to Magento upgrade. What place is the source of truth for the Magento upgrade? You can decide actually. Confluence, Notion, Google Docs, Bookstack, Jira, Trello. You should probably avoid email, Slack, and verbal updates when it comes to source of truth. Like Slack, it's not a source of truth because you will not probably scroll to the conversation you had with the developer about the upgrade, I don't know, a month ago. So don't do it. That should not be a source of truth. I recommend Jira. That's a nice source of truth I worked with for last 3 years, and I never missed any information. If the Jira is nicely configured and you have a nice workflow for the tickets overall, like in general, not only for Magento upgrade. So define the official documentation for the upgrade, and ensure that all team members can access it, so everyone are up to date. So the next thing is for project managers and solutions architect, and I don't know, anyone that has contact with the client, how you can prepare for the meeting. You should review project details you already gathered. You should understand current issues that are on the project. Maybe those issues are more important than Magento upgrade, but you actually need to compare those informations with your client and decide. Prepare the upgrade process overview. So that's what we talk about. That making sure that your client understands the process of that. It's like the best thing you can do on the first meeting, actually. If you will not do it on the first meeting when you want to start talking about Magento upgrade, you will probably have a lot of questions from them. So to avoid that, go for the first meeting and actually present them the whole process step by step, and answer all of those questions they will have about that process. So be prepared, know the process actually. It's not like you will ask someone to give you that process and who will just show it on the client meeting, and that's all. No, you need to understand it and make sure you're able to answer any questions from your clients. Highlight upgrade benefits. Sometimes there are none for the client, so that's tricky. But if you're creative, you're able to do it, I guess, because maybe something will be done better because of the module updates. Set expectations like downtime, risk, backup strategies. We already talked about that. We know how important it is for your client to know that there will be some kind of downtime, for example. Not always. I know that there are some cases where zero downtime is actually possible with Magento upgrade. And backup strategies, if something will go wrong, what we will do. That also should be some kind of process that is wrote down and presented to the client. That will actually impact on the trust of your client also, because they will see that you actually have a plan B and C, and that's a good thing, I guess. And prepare for the client questions. That will be nice if you're able to answer the question on the first meeting. as much as you can with the time frame you have for that meeting. That's good. Saying like, I don't know, I need to ask someone, I will come back with the answer next week. That's something you should avoid on the first meeting when you if you want to start the discussion about Magento upgrade. That's my recommendation. That's also like additional information like about set clear expectation. I will share that presentation so you will be able to read it yourself if you're interested. And yeah, and we get to the key takeaways for the successful Magento upgrade preparation. So know the projects inside out. That's something you need to know. You should be that person. Even if you're a QA, it's good to have that kind of challenge on yourself. Prepare for the first client meeting. Ensure team and stakeholders are aligned and adjust project timeline based on the current state. So I think that's basically a summary of my presentation today. Thank you for your time. And I think that's all. Anyone has any questions?
Ile najdłuższy upgrade ci zajął i dlaczego?
Najdłuższy chyba 4 godziny. Licząc, że robimy upgrade, wgrywamy go na produkcję, testujemy go w ciągu tych 4 godzin, robimy reindeksy w ciągu tych 4 godzin i wszystko inne. To są 4 godziny.
A spotkania, że będzie upgrade?
No, jeżeli masz team, który cały czas działa, jakby ma wytworzony proces, to wiadomo, że te spotkania są już coraz krótsze i na przykład wystarczy 15 minut, gdzie ktoś wchodzi i mówi, słuchajcie, no wszedł upgrade, ale jeszcze go na przykład nie robimy, zrobimy go za miesiąc, bo nie jest tak kluczowy i naszemu klientowi w sumie nie przeszkadza za bardzo. Więc zaczniemy ten rozmowy za 2 tygodnie, ale bądźcie przygotowani. Oni już wiedzą, że gdzieś z tyłu głowy mają się przygotować na to, że będzie dany proces, że będą wyciągać moduły, ich current state, że jakby pójdzie cały ten proces, nie? Jeżeli masz nowy team, no to wiadomo, że warto wykorzystać jakieś internalowe godziny, jeżeli takie masz, żeby usiąść z tym teamem tak bardzo na luźno i przez na przykład 2 godziny sobie ten cały proces wytworzyć, tak? Zastanowić się, co trzeba zrobić. No w tej prezentacji jest sporo tych kroków, które już można zrobić przed samym upgrade'em Magento, więc polecam. I jakby już potem to jest taki waterfall, że jak już zaczniesz się zadawać te pytania, to one powstają kolejne i kolejne przy projekcie. Znam to z doświadczenia mojego. I myślę też w ogóle, że taki Magento upgrade jest fajnym takim testem tego, jak bardzo jesteś zgadana z teamem i czy umiecie dobrze współpracować i przekazywać sobie tą wiedzę, nie? Żeby właśnie ten upgrade szedł jak najkrócej, żeby te spotkania trwały jak najkrócej, nie? Że wszystko idzie na przykład w tikecie w Jirze, tam idzie tylko jeden komentarz od dewelopera, potem drugi komentarz i wszyscy wiedzą, na którym etapie w tym momencie przed na przykład wytworzeniem tego upgrade'u jesteśmy, albo że jesteśmy na etapie tego, że upgrade jest na stagingu i tak naprawdę te spotkania w ogóle nie są potrzebne, bo wszystko masz w Jirze, bo to jest twoje source of truth, tak? I tylko tam wpychasz tą informację, która jest potrzebna, nie?
Ja obstawiam, że nie wypełnili sukces tego, jak powiedziałem, że 4 godziny zajęło. Już raczej.
Tak, to był...
Chodziło o cały update.
Tak, w sensie nie chodziło o cały upgrade w sensie jakby całego procesu, tylko raczej pójście na produkcję z tym upgrade'em. Ale no nie wiem, chyba wydaje mi się, że no był taki jeden skomplikowany projekt, gdzie zajęło nam to 100 godzin, nie? Żeby to wyczyścić, gdzie to był projekt przyjęty przez inną firmę akurat i było tam dużo smaczków, które trzeba było rozwiązać i no... I się okazało, że najlepszym momentem, kiedy to będzie zrobić, to będzie właśnie upgrade Magento i przekonaliśmy klienta do tego, że jeżeli mamy to wszystko ogarnąć, wysprzątać, wyrzucić moduły, które nie są używane, to zróbmy to teraz i po prostu zrobiliśmy upgrade plus po prostu czyszczenie całej bazy z różnych rzeczy, których nie były nam potrzebne, z jakichś custom kodów, które nie były używane. No i to fajnie zadziałało, bo faktycznie performance tego sklepu potem poszedł w górę i nasz klient był bardzo zadowolony z tego upgrade'u. Co prawda przeznaczył na to 100 godzin i w jego akurat budżecie było to dosyć sporo, te 100 godzin, jak na ten projekt, no ale byli finalnie zadowoleni, bo uporali się z wieloma problemami jakby w tym całym jednym procesie. Dziękuję. Proszę, Adrianie.
Dzięki, Aniu. O, dobra, dziękuję również za pilocik. A więc tak, ostatnia prezentacja. Tak naprawdę teraz przechodzimy do takiej już bardziej mniej oficjalnej części naszego spotkania. Widzę, że już pizza jest rozłożona. Jakby dziękuję bardzo Wam za przyjście. Fajnie, że zaczyna wracać powoli ten meetup. Jakby wydaje mi się, że to jest jedna z fajniejszych rzeczy, że te community w Poznaniu się jakoś dobrze trzyma i fajnie, że zaczynamy, jakby wracamy i mam nadzieję, że ta liczba ludzi będzie coraz większa. Prośba o prezentację. Krzychu. Tak, zgłaszajcie się do mnie, Adrian Wyganowski, albo do Bartka, albo do Kuby. Nie ma problemu, jakoś możemy się zawsze dogadać z terminami. Kolejna będzie wydaje nam się, za 2 miesiące, tak? Dobrze mówię, Kuba? Za 2 miesiące, termin jeszcze na pewno przekażemy. Dziękujemy.
Nagrania z tej prezentacji będą dostępne?
Kuba, one są chyba od razu tam.
One jest dostępne na YouTubie. Ta co prawda będzie miała dość specyficzny początek nagrania, ale będzie działało.
Okej.
Jeszcze parę meetupów i będziemy mistrzami streamowania.
To razie,
Idzie powoli.
na razie robimy testy na produkcji. Już powinno być lepiej. Myślę, że chyba nie będzie. No, damy radę następnym razem. Chciałbym też podziękować naszym sponsorom, czyli T-Pay, który zapewnia miejscówkę, Centuria, która zapewnia nam piwo i pizzę, no i Snowdogowi za organizację tego. No i myślę, że to chyba na tym skończymy. I tak na streamie nie możemy pizzy Wam dać, więc chyba możemy już przejść do takiej bardzo offowej części spotkania. Także dziękuję bardzo za przyjście, dziękuję sponsorom i do zobaczenia za 2 miesiące.
Jeszcze odnośnie prezentacji, jeśli ktoś ma ochotę na jakiś taki kilkuminutową nawet zaprezentowanie czegoś, pomysłu, rozwiązania, albo jakieś pytanie, albo wiecie, że znacie kogoś, kto coś takiego ma, to też jest temat fajny na meetup, tak? To nie musi być prezentacja na 15 minut, pół godziny czy godzinę, tylko to może być krótki temat, który zacznie jakąś dyskusję. No, taka jest idea meetupu, to nie jest konferencja, więc jeśli znacie taki temat, znacie kogoś, kto to ma, no to zachęcajcie taką osobę, żeby to podesłała, bo spotkać się na pizzę i piwo się można zawsze, ale no bez tematów ciekawych do rozmowy, no to tracimy trochę połowę tego wartości. Więc zapraszam, podsyłajcie to, jesteśmy tutaj w trójkę już w organizacji, jeśli ktoś jeszcze chce też się przyłączyć do organizacji, to oczywiście też zapraszamy. Im więcej osób jest zaangażowanych w to aktywnie, tym bardziej może to żyć i odbywać się regularnie, więc też ze swojej strony wielkie dzięki. Adrian, dziękuję bardzo za przejęcie tutaj Master of Ceremony, bardzo się z tego cieszę. No i tyle, idziemy jeść i na piwo. Dzięki.